Welcome to Healing Wisdom, a Thursday morning talk show featuring guests sharing their stories and knowledge. We discuss the healing aspects of the arts, metaphysics, social justice, and adventure through all types of terrain. So join me, Pandora Peoples, here on WOMR 92.1 FM in Provincetown and WFMR 91.3 FM in Orleans. We're streaming worldwide at WOMR.org. My next guest is the brilliant world-class guitarist, composer, educator, and musical director Stephane Wremble. He's headlined at Lincoln Center, Carnegie Hall, the Town Hall in New York City, and the Lyon Opera House in France. He's toured around the world and performed at the Montreal Jazz Festival, Rochester International Jazz Festival, the Django Reinhardt Jazz Festival in France, and many others. And he's coming to the Music Room, Cape Cod, September 3rd. Welcome, Stephane. Thank you for being with us. Your music is brilliant, and you're often compared with Django Reinhardt. A lot of people don't know that Django Reinhardt's gypsy jazz was influenced by Bach and other classical composers, and you released an album with many of Django's complicated and unknown classical influence works. So I would love for you to tell us about your relationship with Django and your album.
Django is a very interesting character, very important musician. He's the father of modern guitar, perhaps the greatest guitarist who ever lived. He defined like all the code of guitar, including like all the classical, the gypsy, jazz, whatever like influence he had. He like composed it, and he went back to the classical rules of music, meaning like the rules of harmony and rhythm. He was in control of everything, and of course he was very influenced, as you said, by Bach and by Chopin, and a lot by Debussy and Ravel and Fauré, the musician we call the Impressionists. And amongst his big, huge body of work, he had like 17 pieces for solo guitar that were heavily influenced by these guys. So that's why I transcribed them, the 17 of them, and recorded the album that I call Django the Impressionist, because it's really in the vein of like a continuation of what Debussy or Ravel or Fauré did.
You call music impressionistic. Is that especially true for Django? And I'd love for you to talk about growing up in...
Yeah, I grew up in Fontainebleau, and actually I am in Fontainebleau right now for the next 15 minutes or so. And Fontainebleau is the home of Impressionism. This is where it was born, and first were the Impressionist painters that arrived in the mid-19th century, and also the composer of Debussy, Ravel, Fauré. Impressionism really refers to a way of composing not only on a structural point of view, but with a meaning behind it. It's a little bit like doing film scoring, trying to evoke something, an evocation of nature, of like nymph dancing in the forest, whatever that is, the ocean. And it's to compose based on an image like that. So now it's supposed to accompany an image generated by the listener in a mind. So that's really what we call Impressionism. The big guy was Claude Debussy, is like the guy who revolutionized everything. He's a genius. So it changed the way also music is written, because he started to integrate sounds from like China, from like the gamelan in Indonesia, and he started to include all that in his music, different harmonies and a certain sense of tonality that is way more floating rather than major or minor. So he invented a new way of like creating music and all. And Django Reinhardt was pretty much like perceiving tonality the same way Debussy was, in a very different way, in a floating way, and in a non-major or minor only way. It was broader than that. There is like a third kind. It's very evocative of things, you know what I mean? And because he grew up here, he was in Paris, and then he moved to Fontainebleau, Django, because he was like surrounded by that vibe that helped him to like really develop that impressionistic side of him.
You actually spent years, like 6 or 7 years, with this Romani people, correct? Immersing yourself in the culture. So I'd love for you to talk about that relationship between culture and music.
Well, it's always two things. There is a way of learning which is very structural. It's very important. It's the grammar. The grammar, the technique is what we call the art. There is also the neuronal mirroring way of learning, basically by immersion. So there are two ways to learn. One is like very logical, structural, with a lot of grammar in it. That's where you learn harmony and rhythm, and you learn really the fabric of music. You perfect your technique. This is where there is a lot of work. There is a lot of work in music, a lot. But there is also the other aspect called cultural, which is very mythological and which comes by immersion. So when you immerse yourself with people and they play music a certain way, you tend to, by seeing and just repeating what you see naturally, you will like gain something that's going to come out very quickly by a neuronal mirroring, which doesn't really matter what it is. But there's always those two aspects. But there's always a lot of work also from the other side. I think that every human being is different. We're all unique. And every one of us will play or paint or whatever we do is going to be the same thing, but different every time. Because we cannot reproduce what another human being does, you know? So we have a common ground. There is something that is the same and something that is different. That's like that for everything. You know, there is a sameness and a uniqueness in everything. And in the sameness, we find the laws of music, the laws of nature. So when you have a C major, it's the same C major for everyone on earth. For any genre that we play, every culture we are, like whatever, a C major is a C major. That's physics. But then after that, what we do with it not only changes from instrument to instrument, from country to country, from region to region, culture to culture, but also person to person. There is not twice the same thing, ever. That's very, no matter how much we try, there will not be twice the same thing.
Tell us about your Django New Orleans album that came out this year.
New Orleans is the home of jazz. It's the birthplace. So when I say the word jazz, for example, I always refer to that primal point, to the point of birth, the swing. The swing was born there. And it's a very important thing to keep in mind. So for example, I was saying earlier that there is a sameness and a uniqueness. When I listen to Louis Armstrong, when I listen to Miles Davis and John Coltrane and Gary Burton, every time it's completely different. And we call it jazz, but how can it be the same if it's all different? See, and you can get lost in trying to define what jazz is. Jazz is just the archetypal moment, that birth. So from that, it's an archetypal frame. And from this archetypal frame, once you study the frame, then you can make anything emerge from it, coming from yourself. That's why Miles Davis it's a lot of Miles Davis. When I hear Miles Davis, I know it's Miles Davis. I don't hear jazz. I hear Miles Davis, and I know that Miles Davis studied jazz, meaning he studied that primal frame, like Louis Armstrong did, you know what I mean? And same thing with Coltrane. When you listen to A Love Supreme, you still know that guy has studied the standards before that came from New Orleans. So the jazz part is that archetypal frame, that's that grammar that everyone studies, and then there is the personality. So that's why I refer to that word jazz always, to the archetypal point. And Django Reinhardt also heard jazz for the first time in Paris, people coming from New Orleans. So his music was born into that soil, you know, that musical soil. And what I wanted to do with Django New Orleans is in the modern day and age, like right now, we have a tiny bit of a different sound. We don't sound like 150 years ago. We have different instruments, different amplification and all. So we try to record like plugged in reality of the day. So it's a modern sound, but we still play like traditional songs, like coming from New Orleans, from Django and all, with the specific Django type of groove, like type of swing. It swings a very specific way. There is a little push into it, So there's that drive that you find in Django's music is there, but we also have like the sousaphone. I replaced the bass by the sousaphone, which create a way like more like funky type of song. It doesn't swing the same either, and the marriage between the sousaphone, the guitars, and then we have trumpet, percussion, we have like clarinet, we have a singer. So there is also like all those colors like New Orleans. So there is that inner drive with all these colors and this funkiness from New Orleans. And that creates something that is it's original while being the same, while not being like weird and it's a completely new thing. No, it's the same thing that we've been playing, except we tied it in a completely different way, in a very organic way. And it sounds like nothing else. So it's and it sounds like jazz, so you recognize everything, and there is in it like the virtuosity of the Django world with the violin and the guitars, and we have like an amazing like trumpet player and saxophone and all that. So you have like a real super high level of playing, because I hire only the very best in the band. So it's like an incredible band of performers. It's very the concert level is very high. But because also we use these like funky grooves and stuff from New Orleans, there's also that party that you find in New Orleans. It's the Dionysian world, that meets. It's really like what Nietzsche called in his book, The Birth of Tragedy, the meeting between Apollo, which is the beauty of the form, and Dionysos, which is the inner life that's contained within it. So we have both of them. And he said, when both meet, this is when you have great tragedy, this is when you have a great story. And I believe this is like in Django New Orleans, this is where it meets, with Dionysos, the party time in New Orleans, and Apollo, the beauty of the form and the excellency of the performance.
I love Bistro Fada and Big Brother, which are in the Woody Allen films Midnight in Paris and Vicky Cristina Barcelona. Did you compose them for the soundtracks?
So Big Brother, I composed before, and one day they called me and they said they would like to use it on Vicky Cristina Barcelona. So yes, of course, that was great. And they used it like all over the place, which was amazing. And that was the beginning of my relationship with Woody Allen. And they called me to compose the theme for Midnight in Paris after that. So I did, and that's Bistro Fada. After that, I also composed the song, and I was on a scene in Magic in the Moonlight. But unfortunately, that scene has been cut, so there's no song and I'm not on the screen. And I also just scored the full score for Rifkin Festival. That was his latest movie. So that I did like the entire score from beginning to end.
This is Bistro Fada from Stephane Wremble.
Django to me is to the guitar what Bach is to the keyboard. The more you study Django, the better you understand your instrument, and you start to possess a certain fire, a certain technique, and also a certain way of playing the swing. But that's not all I did. Like I played like a lot of rock and roll. I play a lot of classical guitar, funk, like everything. I studied really everything. And when I compose, like all these things come out. There's nothing like bizarre from another world. It's everything that we kind of know, but everything is arranged in a certain way that is unique, because I try to tap within like that thing in myself that is the uniqueness, and to let the thing blend naturally. And I always have an image in mind. I always have something. So it's a very impressionistic act when I compose.
You're performing at the Music Room Cape Cod in West Yarmouth, September 3rd, so folks can get tickets at musicroomcapecod.com/tickets. You've been listening to Healing Wisdom at Outermost Radio. All of our shows are podcasts at WOMR.org. Also check out healingwisdomradioshow.com and contact me at pandora@WOMR.org. Our theme music is provided by Mason. You can find her website at masonmusic.com. That's MAESYN.